Today we're talking more about music in Life of the Christian. I think, Destry, you're talking about Led Zeppelin, and we're just going to kind of go with it. Episode, 63? Episode 63.
Sounds good. Led Zeppelin.
Yes. So last week, we have to kind of issue a retraction because we said the wrong episode.
We did.
On the hook.
Yeah.
And it's a different episode than the number on the title. It's because we just don't know how to count. That's all.
That's all right. We're not numbers guys.
Right. But, next week will be a perfect square, 64.
So this is really 63. What did we call it last week?
We talked about 63, and it was episode 62 last week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We talked about the Dixie Chicks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I introduced, I teased that we're going to talk about Led Zeppelin.
Yes.
And we will talk about Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
But I will say this: there's a new documentary out called Becoming Led Zeppelin, and I really wanted to see that before doing this episode.
Right.
So I don't really have as much content as I wanted. It's out, but it's out in what is that theater where it's surround? It's not surround sound, whatever.
Oh,
it's
the Big
called.
Sphere.
And
was it L.A. or something?
No, well, it's the theater that over at the Naval Air Station.
IMAX.
IMAX.
Sorry, I thought I was totally in a different space.
I think they're out in IMAX, so I just have to. I don't have my head's not screwed on tight, almost quite literally, because I have this condition. I get dizzy easy.
Right.
I'll say that. And going to an IMAX, that's just like saying, "Hey, Destry, why don't you have a really hardcore episode of dizziness?" So I can't really. I don't want to get that immersed.
Yeah.
In it, but I want to see the documentary.
Now,
anyway.
So remind us again. So this is the Deep Dive Podcast, Christian podcast. Why are we talking about Led Zeppelin? There's a reason for it.
There is a reason for it. We talked initially our conversations, which we have a lot more conversations off air than we do on air. All three of us do. Chris, Josh, and I do. Even whenever we get together, we have before we record, we have hour plus long conversations.
Right.
And one of them was about music. And if I remember correctly, Josh, my spectrum of music that I listen to is very, very broad. And so we started with that. And my question was, should a Christian be influenced by an artist, specifically in this case, musicians' political or religious views? Should that influence us? And if we listen to them or not? Right. And I think it's just a question that I always ask myself, and my answer personally is, well, it depends if I like the music a lot or not.
Right.
It's not a policy that I have. It's black and white.
I think it's a question that a lot of Christians struggle with, is because there is a lot of good music out there, but there's often a stigma with where this music is sourced from.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of legitimate aspects to that way of thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
But do we go overboard with it, or just those things?
Yeah.
It's healthy to discuss that because one of the things that's often looked at as just totally safe are things like hymns. I love hymns, but a lot of the hymn writers had some less than comfortable pasts.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
And so. The deeper you think about it, it's the same question about all types of music.
Yeah.
Are you able to separate the music from the artist, and is there still something useful or beneficial to listening to the music, whether it's the music itself or the lyrics or whatever, that's independent of the person who or the people who made the music?
So I think that's a great point, and it's an ongoing discussion.
Yeah.
It is. It's an ongoing discussion in my head. It's an ongoing discussion that I think we should have here.
And oftentimes I think we'll cross that line, and we don't realize it until after we've crossed that line.
So I use the example of me driving down the road in my new to me car, with the top down, just cruising around town singing, "I'm on the highway to hell."
Yeah, right.
And I said it, and I said, "Wait a minute, I'm not on the highway to hell."
Right.
So I stopped listening to it. It got me off guard. I was singing that because of the melody, because of the 25 plus years I've been listening to AC/DC.
Right.
Not one of my favorite bands, but I listen to them a lot. But I simply just don't want to sing that lyric.
Right.
I just simply don't want to sing it. So I might skip or rewind. It doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to AC/DC.
Yeah.
If it's somebody like Marilyn Manson, I simply am not interested in anything that man's got to say.
Right.
Is that a fault in my character? Perhaps, but he's so extroverted about what he feels about Christ and what he feels about anything except for the devil. Why do I want to have that influence in my life?
Right.
I'm already having to navigate all the things that I like that may have some negative influence, and I don't need to be influenced by somebody who is overtly against Christ.
Who uses that artistic outlet as a means to like project his own personal beliefs. Like his music is for proselytizing, in other words. And we've talked about this. He's got every right to do that. Mm-hmm. He's got every right to do that. Right? The freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. That's fine. So you've taught me a lot about how whenever we get when we talk about those things, freedom of speech, of course, freedom of religion, of course, but you've got to go to the very opposite of where you are whenever you're talking about those. Right.
We don't say freedom of speech for Christians or freedom of religion if you believe in Christ. That's exactly what we accuse, quote, the other side of doing.
Right.
Right? If we're talking about politics specifically. So we got to be very, very careful about that.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of an intro of what we're talking about today.
Right.
As a side note, another intro, what the listener, and I say the listener, is probably noticing is that there's no video again today.
There's no video. Let's put a picture of just Chris's face, Chris's mug up there, just so we can look at that and be pleased by that.
And you might notice a slight echo. So there's been a bunch of changes, right?
Yep, another change. One thing about this podcast, it's always changing, baby.
Well, we warned everyone at the beginning of the year there's going to be some significant changes coming, and this is
we
one
did say
of them.
that. Yep.
Not that we're going back to a pure audio podcast, but some of our new video equipment still hasn't arrived yet.
Right.
And we're recording in a different location.
Yes.
A location that's a little bit more convenient, a little bit more stable, predictable, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But the video equipment that was supposed to be here by today is actually coming later today.
Yes.
And so we have new cameras. We have a new location at my secret office location where I work.
I like the way that sounds. Secret location.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to my wife last night, and just joking like, how busy I stay with projects and stuff.
Yep.
I said I don't have a web page. I don't have a Facebook. I used to, but I took the Facebook page down because I needed to limit how people could contact me.
Yeah.
So I don't have a web page. I don't have a Facebook page. I don't have a social media profile. I don't advertise.
All that stuff that businesses are taught to do,
I said I don't tell people the location of my office because I need to be able to get work done.
That is so funny, by the way. You don't learn that in business school.
I know, right?
Don't tell anybody about what I do.
I keep waiting for the hammer to fall and come to the realization that oh no, I need to start marketing now.
I don't see that.
I like
if you stopped right now, how long would it be? Do you think to finish all the work that you've got?
Probably about 6 months.
6 months. You're 6 months out. That's you kind of stay about 6 months out, don't you?
Yeah, and it's so weird because everything you hear people talk about developing business and stuff is like the complete opposite.
It is. Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I credit God for it. It's a huge blessing.
I think that's why the main reason that you're so successful, really.
Maybe, I don't know.
In what you do with the income that He gives you. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just do anyway.
But yeah, so we're all that to say we're at my secret office location that nobody knows about. Only a handful of people.
So funny.
But I remember working for other companies in the past where that was widely known and people would walk through the door, and it's really difficult when like I have a deadline of something that's due by the end of the day, and someone walks in the front door unannounced, unexpected.
Yep.
You have to stop doing that and
Right.
talk to them. So I've purposefully kept my office location secret so that it forces people to contact me like, hey, I'd like to meet. And we meet at at a coffee shop or something like that.
You've got total control over how that works. And that's what you've wanted.
And that's really allowed me to. I mean, it's still difficult to keep up with all the deadlines just because they're always coming, but it allows me a little bit more control over that.
And you can be the father and the husband that you want to be.
Yes. Yeah.
That God has called you to be.
My wife knows and my daughter knows where my office is.
Sure.
And sometimes
and your close friends.
Yeah, and my close friends. Yeah. and there's like.
And Chris.
And and there's maybe 3 clients of mine that know where I am.
Okay.
But it's all like those are carefully chosen because I know they're not just going to drop in unannounced. Because they.
Donna is a federal employee. She works on one of the bases here in town. And she has been blessed enough to, up until a couple of weeks ago, she's been blessed enough to be able to work from home. And thank God she has been, because she takes care of her mother.
Right.
And it's just worked out really well. You know what I mean? Where she has a room where in the house with her office, and her mother is less than 25 foot away from her. So if her mother needs anything, she's right there.
Yeah.
It just has worked out beautifully. But now, since Trump has taken office, he sent out a memo. All federal employees are going back to work in the workplace.
Yeah.
Well, that's one in the bad column, but I totally understand. But she'll be the first to tell you that she is more productive at home, much more productive at home than she is at her office, because she shares an office and people come in looking for the person that she shares an office with, and all that just keeps the workflow from going. Yeah, you know what I mean. And
you need uninterrupted time to do work.
That's right.
That's work like that. And it's funny. I used for years I worked just from home. The reason I got an office space because I was working with a couple young engineers who were working or still working their way towards licensure, but we needed a space since we were all sharing this workload. We needed a space where we could all get together and collaborate and have that sort of workspace. And so that's why I ended up leasing an office space to begin with. But it just kind of grew into like just general collaboration space, whether it's with them or with you guys or with certain clients, and stuff like that. So it's kind of been built around that idea.
It's nice to have a place out of the house, especially if you've worked in your home for so long. It is nice to have a place to go to work. Yeah. To get away from and have that solitude. Right. So
it's our cats. They don't let me work anymore. They always jump up on the desk and in my lap and are always wanting attention.
Absolutely. Enjoy that while you can. We've lost our cat that did that. The cat I have now is not like that, and I miss that. I do. I miss that a whole lot about our cats. But anyway, so we're an audio podcast right now, yes, and there's probably some echo, yes, but this is a move towards something even better. Right. I'm a firm believer of every time we've moved up. You know what I mean? We started with my iPhone in an A106 outside of my office. We moved into my office. We moved into a studio, and now we moved into your studio here. Yeah. And each one was a move up, and I think you were talking about getting some
acoustic panels for the walls. Yeah.
And right now we've got the potential for where we are right now to make this. If we needed to, we could come in, turn everything on, and record and be out in an hour if we needed to, right? Right. Whenever everything gets set up and all that
a huge challenge because usually when we get here, we talk for a while.
Yeah, right, right. I've heard on
The challenge isn't necessarily the equipment; it's us.
right. That's true. That's true. That's what it's going. I've heard Kimmel and all the other hosts, say that whenever they greet their host in the green room or whatever, they just greet real quick and then they go away, especially if they know each other.
Yeah,
because they'll do the exact same thing.
Right.
Anyway, so Led Zeppelin, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
They're good. There you go. That's my rendition.
What's your favorite? Well, I'll ask two questions. Well, three questions.
Okay.
What's your favorite song? And why is it your favorite song? And what's your favorite album? And why is it your favorite album?
Wow.
So I guess
Okay.
two questions that are each two questions.
So I might eventually answer those questions. Okay. I've got in front of me is Led Zeppelin remasters.
I like that answer, by the way. I wish I could use that more. I might answer your
I
question.
might get there by accident.
In a deposition, something. I might answer that.
Pay close attention, just in case I do answer that. This is a double CD, and it's like the greatest hits, best of. It's called Remastered.
Did you say this is the Devil's CD?
No, a double CD.
Oh.
It's a double CD.
I totally misheard that.
It is a double CD.
Like, well, we're jumping right into it.
Yep.
This is the Devil's CD.
Dos CDOs.
Okay.
So it's got a whole bunch of songs on it, and I'm sure that one of my favorites on here, there's 11, there's 15, 22, 3, 4, there's 25 songs on here. Kashmir, I love Kashmir. But let me start by saying this. Led Zeppelin was a band that took everybody by storm. Mm-hmm. They got together and they went 100%, and we're going to make this work. And let me just say the names of the members. Jimmy Page played lead guitar. Robert Plant, lead singer. John Paul Jones, bassist, and John Bonham was the drummer. And whenever you hear these guys get together, listen, if you saw pictures of them, they're hippies from the 70s. There's no question about it. I mean, look at, I'm going to show Josh these pictures. Like those are hippies from the 70s, right? This is what they look like. This is who they are. My favorite song, I can't say right off, but I can look at any list of Led Zeppelin songs and sing it in my head and go, man, I love that song. I love that song. And many of them are totally different. The Rain song.
What is it about the songs? Is it the lyrics or their style of music?
It's the dynamics of Led Zeppelin. It's almost when you're listening to Led Zeppelin, it's the silence is so much a part of the music as the music is because of the way they use the silence. It's hard rock, and I've got a soft spot in my heart for hard rock. I've always loved hard rock.
Why is that?
I get a little misty. Hard rock. I don't know. It's a good way to get. I am reminded of good friends of mine whenever I see this music.
Okay.
Especially Kent, my buddy Kent that we lost a couple years ago. We would get in his black '69 Mustang, and he had like 6 big speakers in that Mustang, and we'd turn that thing up, man, and we'd ride around town and listen to this music. And each song has a different memory. Like, for example, the Rain song, not necessarily a different memory, but the Rain song is a love song. You are the sunlight in my growing is one of the lyrics in there. So, written by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant. So many, as hard rock as they are, a lot of the lyrics read like a poem, a love song or a poem. When it's surrounded by many times this hard rock. Now the Rain song is just keyboard and guitar. It's really melodic. 7 minutes and 39 seconds. That's a long song in today's standards, right? That's
like Hillsong length.
Right. Here's one, R. Kelly's Last Stand, 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
Right? 5, 6.5 minutes long.
It's like Carrie Job length.
That's right. 8 minutes long. You got to keep in mind, whenever we were listening to this music, whenever it was out, albums, it came out on albums. Mm-hmm. And if all of our young listeners, you remember that young listener we've got?
Right, yeah.
They don't remember, or even music lovers may not remember or understand that, at least with my buddies and me, we would get an album and we would sit and we would listen to the entire thing from front to back, and it would be an experience that we had. Most of the time, it's not in the car, of course, if it was an album, but we'd be in a bedroom or a dorm room or something, and we'd sit and we would just listen, and we wouldn't talk. We would listen, and we'd read the lyrics on the album. And of course, one person would have the lyrics, and we'd pass it around for another, different song or whatever. So it was an experience, and just that itself bonded us to the music and to each other. So we don't really listen to music like that these days. So it's hard to compare Led Zeppelin the way I experienced it with today's music. It's just almost a totally different genre of things, but it's a different way of listening. Why? What was the other question? What's your favorite song, mm-hmm.
and why is it your favorite song? What's your favorite album, and why is it your favorite album?
The Rain song, I think I'm just going to say that's my favorite song because it is more melodic. It's more of a love song from hardcore rockers. The reason Led Zeppelin is one of my top 2-3 bands is just the dynamics of them, who they were 100% rock and roll at the time. Mm-hmm. It was a time before disco, but it was kind of, we were hardcore. This may surprise you, Chris, but I had a mullet. I had a good mullet, man. I had a really good mullet. And that was kind of I'm not saying that I'm not going to have another one either. I might have a good mullet.
Well, then we'll have to go back to audio podcast.
And we might have to, that's right. For our maintain all of our watchers and listeners. But that was kind of a way of separating ourselves from public, you know what I mean?
Right.
Having that and listening to this type of rock and roll music, anti-disco thing.
This was in the 90s?
Well, we were still listening to the Zeppelin, whenever disco came out, and that was 90s, late 80s. But
I was more referring to the mullet.
The mullet, yes. Mullet was 80s.
Oh, okay.
80s into the 90s.
So you were doing mullets before Billy Ray Cyrus made
Oh,
it
yeah.
popular.
Oh, Billy Ray Cyrus. I think he saw a picture of me.
Yeah.
And then he said, I want
That
to get
makes
it
sense.
just like that. Sure. Immigrant Song is a good one. Heartbreaker, Dazed and Confused. These are all just long songs that are almost like an opera. It's almost like something you would experience all at once, and then go on to the next one, and you'd say, "Oh yeah, this is my favorite song." And then you hear the next one. Oh yeah, this is my favorite. Memories. The reason that I love Led Zeppelin is the memories that I have with the friends that I had, and I can still just listen to an album at my house of Led Zeppelin and be brought back to that time. The sound was totally different than anything else. They did not sound like anybody else, and that's what I was looking for back then. Jimmy Page, the guitarist, was one of the first people I've seen play a guitar with a bow, a violin bow. You can see a picture of him right there, and it's had such a unique sound. Robert Plant. This guy was a sex symbol times 10. If you ever see a picture of him, I don't know how he even breathed with the pants that he was wearing. It was bell bottoms, hip huggers, and my God! And the thing was, it wasn't even stretch pants back then. But I don't even know how to describe how he looks. But the women loved it, man. Mm-hmm. The women loved it, and he had the long blonde hair, and he sang. He still sings today, and they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. but you cannot sing. I think it's physically impossible to sing the way he sang and maintain that through the years. So he
Right.
still sings, but he doesn't go on those high registers like he used to.
There's this meme that I've seen that just absolutely cracks me up. It's Robert Plant as different things, and you know I forget what song it is, but the one where it's like
The immigrant song.
yeah. It's that sound, but it's like it'll be like a forklift with Robert Plant's head on it, and the forklift is making that sound, or like a sports car or whatever when it revs up, it's
He was a machine, man.
and it's Robert Plant as a forklift, Robert Plant as a sports car, Robert
That's
Plant
funny. That's funny.
as a cordless drill.
Well, I do want to watch Becoming Led Zeppelin, the documentary. This is the first documentary on Led Zeppelin that the members of the band themselves helped create. So there's several documentaries on them, but they didn't help create it. So I'd like to see this and how they became, their relationship with music, and how it started and how it evolved. John Bonham, the drummer, died in 1980, I think it was, 2 years before I graduated high school, and we all mourned. It was a mourning. That was the height of us listening to Led Zeppelin,
Right.
and we mourned about that. It was the first time I think I've actually mourned from somebody and really felt it without knowing the person, you know.
Right.
Anyway, so that's my take on Led Zeppelin for right now. I'll come back to them and after I see the video.
I think I always think it's interesting how, how the formation of music, like that process is, which we'll get to here in a second. But one thing I wanted to ask first, so the uniqueness of most bands from the 60s and 70s, do you think there was a shift kind of into industry where like one from one band to another in those decades, there is a uniqueness that you don't see today, or is that even true? Like, is the uniqueness across different groups or different artists the same back then as it was now, or is now like more of like template music where everyone's kind of doing the same template? I guess it's kind of a weird question because when you're, well, let me get your thoughts on it first.
Okay.
Yeah.
My thoughts on it first is that it's a hard question to answer because things have changed so much in technology. The way things are recorded, the way things are put out, it's totally different. But I do think that if somebody is, I don't know how to say it, if somebody is different these days, they stand out more than somebody that was different back then. Does that make sense? I think the music today is more similar to each other than the music was
So there's like
back then.
different versions of uniformity. Back then, everybody was unique, just like everybody else. But nowadays, everybody is the same. So it's almost like the same end result.
And I think in a way, I think it has evolved similarly. It's hard to see the evolution these days, honestly, because I don't keep up with the music these days as much as I would like to. I think I've mentioned before that I kind of thought to myself in 2025, I'd like to get to know more modern music that's been put out in the last 10 years. I simply don't know a lot of it.
Yeah.
So I can't really answer that, but I can't answer as clearly as I'd like to. But I think it has evolved in the same way in certain ways, because even back from the 60s to the 70s, the boards that the producers were using changed a whole lot. It used to be, there was one time, and there is a researchable way of finding out when this happened and how it happened, but there's a time, a hard timeline before and after something happened in the music business where 1 year, if you recorded something, even the best of its ability, and then whatever I'm talking about happened, and then you recorded the next year, you'd want to go back and you'd want to go and re-record something because it just brought all the volumes up. It brought the guitars and the drums and all the stuff that's in the background. It brought that volume up, and it had a bigger hit. It's almost like going from standard definition to high definition to 4K to 8K with music. That's why these days, if you're going to go to a store and get a CD, I would strongly suggest getting one that's been remastered.
Yeah.
Because it's a big difference. You can tell a big difference listening to even something that looks modern. But if it's one of the original recordings, it's just not going to have the same sound quality. Nowhere near the sound quality.
I remember when, and I think we talked about this on a episode in the past, but I remember when there was this shift from audio cassettes to CDs.
Yeah.
And the first time we got a CD player and a CD, it was like a CD Walkman, and we got the little car kit. We were in an 88 Dodge Omni, and the first CD we got was Alison Krauss and the Cox Family, which is probably one of the reasons why she's my favorite singer to this day, because I just remember my mind just being absolutely blown in the difference. Because I had that, I had that cassette, and I remember listening to that cassette because I grew up. My two favorite genres of music was classical and bluegrass, and so I loved like the southern gospel style bluegrass.
Right.
Some of my favorite CDs were like Appalachian hymns and things like that, because I just love those instruments. And I remember having the cassette tape of Alison Krauss and the Cox Family, and listening to it and knowing it to the point where when one song ends, my brain immediately goes into the introductory,
right?
The intro of the next song.
Sure.
And then getting the CD of it and just having my mind absolutely blown, because even that quality was poor quality compared to what we have now.
But we didn't know it.
Yeah, because it was still the speakers of an 88 Dodge Omni,
Right.
the car kit, and a CD Walkman, in that little car. But just the crispness of the voices and the instruments and all that stuff just absolutely blew my mind.
Yep.
And then putting that on cheap headphones and hearing it directly pumped into my ears, it was just amazing. And I think getting back to the original question, the difference in the uniqueness of 60s and 70s music, or just any era compared to a later era. I think our ability to master the sound of it, like you were saying, I think that's significantly different. But more than that, one of the weird things about music for me is there's an essence of music that goes deeper than its quality. And I think as a society, we know this intuitively, because when you look at the different bands and artists and stuff of like 60s and 70s, there is one noticeable difference between them and all the artists now. Back in I'll call it the old days, whatever you want to, whatever era you want to attribute with that name, but there was more focus on the talent of the artist than there was on the appearance of the artist. Right on,
yeah.
And because you look at like the old music videos or the old, even when an artist would be like a musical guest on a television show or something, it was just them standing on the stage with an instrument and microphones. But even now, even if you're just a musical guest on a show, you have backup dancers, pyrotechnics, lasers, fog machines, all this other stuff. And, a lot of times the artists, they're not even actually doing the singing. It's singing that they did previously that was digitally mastered, and it's pumped in over them, because they're jumping around and singing and dancing and doing all that kind of stuff too. And it's impossible to hold long notes and do that with precision when you're also jumping around doing gymnastics and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest changes in music for me is now there's such more focus put on the performance of music than the music itself.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see sort of this degradation in, like, the lyrics are meaningless, the melody itself, and that kind of stuff seems to be canned or template. And there's exceptions, obviously, there always have been. But I think that's probably the biggest difference for me between older music and newer music. Is just now we have all of this ability to electronically and visually manipulate stuff, and our music has kind of become more ADHD than it has been contemplative.
It has. I agree with that, and I'll say this about Led Zeppelin, and then we can transition. But they were trendsetters. So whereas today, I think I hear you saying is there's a formula. There's more of a formula today of being successful. So there's people that make it their business to find 4 or 5 good-looking young boys that might have an okay voice, but man, they can push them through and be successful as anybody else, right?
Yeah.
Not saying that all the boy bands are like that, but there's an industry where that happens. That could not be more different than the way Led Zeppelin in that era came through. They got together and said, let's make it happen, man. Let's record. Let's go somewhere for 2 weeks in a castle. Let's record. Then we will we'll travel all around, and we'll see if we can get people to come to our concerts. That's the way they were successful. They were being, in my opinion, they were being who they are, and people wanted to see that.
Right.
We weren't catering, the producers weren't catering to what they thought people wanted to see. We just wanted to see Led Zeppelin. We wanted to see that. We wanted to peek behind the curtain about what it is. How do they make this music like this? Because it doesn't sound like any instrument I've ever heard, but it's a guitar.
Yeah.
And his voice, how is Robert Plant, what is he using to make his voice go so high and then just melt in with the guitar? How does that happen? We wanted to see it happen.
Right.
So they were certainly outliers, and people wanted to. They're one of the bands that people said that sounds just like Led Zeppelin. They were, whenever they came out, it hit, man, and people just loved it. So that's one of the reasons I like them.
Yeah.
They're really, really good. Jimmy Page, the guitarist, he's the magic behind all the music, and he's the one that produced everything. He knew what he wanted it to sound like, and he's the guitarist, and he went in and tweaked everything to make it sound the way he wanted it to sound. So
Cool.
I always appreciate that.
Well, I want to talk about a songwriter and a musician in the Bible, because I think it goes along really well with what kind of the theme of what we've been talking about here lately. But a little bit of history first. So back in the Old Testament, this is back in the book of Numbers. Israel, they're out of Egypt. They're in the wilderness. They've built the tabernacle. They're this fledgling nation. I mean, a lot of people, but a young nation that are kind of by themselves in the wilderness, and yet God's presence dwells with them. And in this tabernacle, which we've talked a lot about in past episodes, it's kind of like my latest obsession of things to study in the Scripture is the tabernacle and the temple eras, and how they sort of weave themselves through world history. But the tabernacle, it had a lot of infrastructure to support it. There were the priests themselves, who were the family of Aaron, but then Aaron's cousins. There's 3 families that came from the tribe that Aaron was a part of, and one of these families was the family of Kohath, and there's a guy specifically in there named Korah, and Korah and some of his friends from the tribe of Reuben started kind of evaluating what their position was with respect to the tabernacle. The sons of Korah, they were one of the three families that were, the three families were split up to take care of like the tapestries of the tabernacle, the instruments of the tabernacle, like the table of showbread and the laver and altars and stuff like that, and then another family, I believe it was the Kohath family. They were kind of like the structural guys. They would take down the beams and the boards and stuff like that, because the tabernacle was meant to be a mobile structure, and so everybody had their roles. And then Aaron's family, they were the priests. Aaron being the high priest, and his sons being the lower priests, for lack of a better word, but just different priests. They were the ones that maintained it and were instrumental in the processes and the ceremonies of the tabernacle. Well, Korah kind of got jealous a little bit and was like, well, God told us earlier that the whole congregation, all of Israel is holy. Mm-hmm. So why aren't we able to do the priest stuff? Why are we, sort of relegated to this, in their minds, this lower position of being the setup and takedown crew?
So they were more behind the scenes? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're more behind the scenes. And so they had come to Moses and vocalized that criticism, and they said, we want to do the priest stuff. And Moses said, okay, try it. And if God's cool with it, because God is the one that set that whole hierarchy up. Mm-hmm. He said, okay, try it. If God's cool with it, then we'll know. And if he's not, something really bad will happen. Mm-hmm. Like, the earth will swallow up, or, we'll open up and swallow it.
For example, that might happen.
And so they did try it, and that's what happened. The earth swallowed up and opened up and swallowed up Korah and all the people that were siding with Korah, like Nathan and Abiram, the Reubenites that were sort of instrumental in him developing and growing this opinion, this jealousy. And but yet Korah's sons, they didn't get consumed in this, because we can only assume that they didn't really buy into it. Mm-hmm. But Korah ended up dying. Korah ended up dying, but the sons of Korah didn't. And it's interesting, the legacy of the sons of Korah, specifically this one of his sons named Abiasaph. And Abiasaph, when you trace down his genealogy, it comes to a really significant person in the Old Testament. As we go through the book of Judges, we're reading about people like Samson and Deborah and Gideon and all these people, and we get all the way through the book of Judges, and we end up in the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel. And Samuel was the last judge in Israel. And towards the end of his life, Israel were like, well, we don't want to be judged anymore. We want a king like everybody else has. Mm-hmm. And so they approached Samuel about this. And Samuel, he went to God, and God says, like, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Mm-hmm. They're going to have a king eventually, but they're jumping the gun. All this kind of stuff. But it ultimately led into Saul becoming the first king. Mm-hmm. Well, Samuel, he through God's direction, he found Saul, anointed him to be king, and while Saul was king, God was already preparing David to be the next king. Different family, different tribe, all that. David is one of the most recognized songwriters in history. He wrote an entire book of songs. And Samuel was extremely instrumental in David's development, both spiritually and from a leadership standpoint. And it's interesting to see Samuel's legacy, because he is a descendant of Korah. and he was a descendant of that one son of Korah, Abiasaph. And the sons of Korah become really important in Old Testament history because when the tabernacle was abandoned because David and Solomon brought about or built the temple, which was not a temporary structure, it was permanent. There was no longer need of these three families to break stuff down and move stuff and all that.
Right.
And so they got reassigned by David in preparation for his son Solomon to build the temple. And the sons of Korah became musicians. So Samuel came from a family that was very musically inclined. And David was very musically inclined. He played the harp. He wrote all these songs. And as you go through the book of Psalms, occasionally you'll come across one where David has written it, but he's written it to the sons of Korah. And I think that's interesting because the songwriting process has always been something of curiosity to me because the process that takes, it can be a couple different forms. Either there's a melody that inspires lyrics, or there's lyrics that inspires melodies. I remember just the other day I was watching a video. The guitarist Slash.
Yes. Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, one of the most famous songs from the Guns N' Roses was "Sweet Child of Mine." It has that guitar riff down, and he was talking about that song, the evolution of that song. He says that they were just kind of in the living room, kind of playing around with different stuff, and he just started doing this riff on the guitar, and he started doing it, in that video, and how it kind of cycles through the scales of whatever key he was playing in, and upstairs, the other guy who actually wrote the lyrics of the song was hearing that, and independently, Slash was just playing with an interesting melody he kind of happened upon on the guitar, and the other guy was upstairs listening to that, and it inspired him to write the lyrics.
Okay.
And so he starts writing down the lyrics to "Sweet Child of Mine," and he comes downstairs a little bit later. He's like, "Hey, I think these words will go really well with that lyric," and so that's kind of how that song was born. There's other times where someone has an idea, like the Star Spangled Banner is a really good example of that, where Francis Scott Key, he was inspired by the aftermath of a battle and what happened to the flag of the United States during that battle in Fort McKinley. Yeah, Fort McKinley. McHenry. And he wrote this poem that was in defense of Fort McHenry. And it was the words of Star Spangled Banner.
Okay.
But then later, someone saw those words and then set it to music.
Okay.
It was like an old bar tune that had already existed. But they're like, these words match this tune really well.
Okay.
And that's how we got our national anthem today. Well, that type of, or that process is similar to how David wrote a lot of the Psalms. Because when you go through the Psalms, it's David just like pouring his heart out time and time again about different things he's struggling with, and every so often you'll see an introduction to a psalm where it says, David wrote this to the chief musician for the sons of Korah.
Yes, right.
Because the Korah were kind of like the worship leaders in the temple.
Okay.
Psalm 42 is a really good example of that, and I love the lyrics to this song. It says, "As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. My soul thirsteth for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my meat day and night, while they continually say unto me, Where is thy God? When I remember these things, I pour out my soul in me, for I had gone with the multitude. I went with them to the house of God with the voice of joy and praise, with a multitude that kept holy day." Why art thou cast down, O my soul, and why art thou disquieted in me? Hope thou in God, for I shall yet praise him for the help of his countenance. My God, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore, I will remember thee from the land of Jordan, and of the Hermonites from the hill Mizar. Deep calleth unto deep at the noise of thy waterspouts, and all thy waves and thy billows are gone over me. Yet the Lord will command his loving kindness in the daytime, and in the night his song shall be with me, and my prayer unto God, unto the God of my life. I will say unto God, my rock, why hast thou forgotten me? Why go I mourning because of the oppression of the enemy? And with a sword in my bones, mine enemies reproach me, while they say daily to me, where is thy God? Why art thou cast down, my soul? And why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God, for I shall yet praise him, who is the health of my countenance and my God. Now, we lose a lot of the musical qualities of that because it's translated from Hebrew into English. Mm-hmm. But one of the two really compelling things from this is how David's songs often, I mean, he was obviously someone who felt very deeply. I would love to know what his personality type was, but psalms like this, where he's struggling with something, and he's like, I'm so discouraged, and it seems like everything is against me, and yet by the end of it, he comes around and he's like, but even in spite of that, God, there's some awesome quality about God that is the solution to the thing that I'm struggling with, and his heart turns by the end of the song to be like, I'm no longer focusing on me or the problem that I'm struggling with. I'm now focusing on God, and that's the solution to everything. But what also is interesting, I think Jesus was an avid listener of music, because when Jesus was on the cross, and he was taking the punishment for our sins, and there was a moment where God had to turn his back on Christ because of the sin that he had taken on behalf of all of us. God couldn't look on something that was no longer perfect. Right. And Jesus uttered a lyric from this song. He says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And that comes from Psalm 42:9. I will say unto God, why hast thou forgotten me? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really interesting insight, not just into David as a songwriter, the sons of Korah as musicians, but Jesus as a listener, as a listener of music, because in his most dire state, what came to his mind was a lyric from one of his favorite albums.
Wow, that's fantastic. I didn't know that he was quoting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
I like it, Josh. Thanks, man. That's a good comparison, or a good way of looking at that.
Right.
Knowing that Jesus listened to music somehow makes it okay. You know what I mean? Not that it was wrong to begin with, but
I can just see him saying, this one of my favorite albums was this. It was a 100 and something CD set.
Yeah, that's right.
But dude, this guy David, my great grandfather, dude could lay down some lyrics.
That's right. Oh my gosh. All right, well, guys, we're gonna wrap it up, man. Chris, thanks for being here and setting all this up, and Josh, for allowing us to come into your
a secret location,
your
very
secret
deep
location.
in the Himalayas.
Yes, to letting us record. Next week we should be video next week.
Yes,
we'll see. But
the video cables are supposed to be coming in today.
Very good. Okay, we'll see what happens. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to y'all later.
Yeah.